very much. I will have to say, though, one thing, I did not found House Soccer League.
Oh.
I've only been president for 17 years, but it was around a few years before that, so we appreciate it. I just thank you for the warm reception. And the thing is that I would like to correct one thing in the introduction, if you don't mind. And that is that I just do not, I do not consider myself, I never have considered myself as a hero. And I know I've heard some comments about John McCain here tonight, but to paraphrase a similar sentiment that I heard him express once, he said, I do not consider myself a hero, but I was honored to serve in the company of heroes, and that's the way I feel about it. But when it comes to war heroes, I regard those who did not return and those who gave their fullest measure of devotion as heroes. They made the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our freedoms, liberty, and way of life. And those are the ones that will always be heroes in our country. There's an old adage that sometimes you do not appreciate the things you have until you've lost them. And that realization struck home to me during what I consider a life-changing experience for not just myself, but also my wife. And from late 1966 to mid-67, I was stationed here at Aitken Air Force Base in the 33rd Tactical Fighter Wing as an F-4 backseater, or GIB, they called it, GIB. Now, they said that GIB stood for guy in back, but a few years after I got back, I had a real thick Webster's dictionary, and I found GIB in there, and the definition of GIB was a castrated tomcat. So, I'm not so sure it's such an honorable title. I will say one good thing about not being stationed here at Aitken is this is where I met my lovely wife, and she's got me for 43 years already. She went through a lot also. Our squadron deployed in May 1967. We went to Ubon, Thailand, Southeast Asia. We started flying combat missions over North Vietnam. Now, I was proud to be serving in that capacity, serving my country, securing the knowledge that we were out by communism, which in those days considered a very open and dangerous threat to our nation and way of life. The communists, in particular those in the Soviet Union, were out to bury us, as Nikita Khrushchev, the premier of the Soviet Union, publicly proclaimed. And they were openly supporting insurgencies throughout third world countries, hoping to establish communist regimes in those countries as well. The Soviet and the Chinese communist governments were sponsored, open sponsors of President Ho Chi Minh and his communist regime in North Vietnam. And they had as their goal the overthrow and conquest of South Vietnam. And that's what we were there to stop. So here I was flying along, fat, dumb, and happy on my 70th combat mission over North Vietnam, when my world got turned upside down and hurt heartbeat. And it's like that old Frank Sinatra song about you flying high in April and shot down in May. And it's got a lot of truth to it. Turned out there was a MiG-21 and a sneak attack came in from our 6 o'clock, which is directly from the rear, fired a heat-seeking missile that blew the tail off our aircraft. And my front seater and I both safely ejected, and we both had good shoes. As I was coming down, I could see that I was heading for what I thought was the biggest, largest clearing in all of North Vietnam. My front seater, for some reason, was drifting off with some motels, trees on it. And so I was preparing, when I landed, I was going to have to get out of my harness and everything and try and find cover and hurry. But as I stood up, I was standing face to face with 2 young Vietnamese, probably in their early 20s, militia outfits wearing pith helmets and bayonets and their rifles. And they were looking down their sights at me. Then I heard a hoopla over to the left. About another 40 or 50 of them came charging out of the woods. Oh, they were making such loud noise and everything, and I knew I wasn't going anywhere. So I pulled out my survival radio and made a quick call on the line that I was captured and raised my hands in the air. My front seater was captured about 4 hours later. That night they took the 2 of us into what was known as the infamous Hanoi Hilton, and that's where I was spending the next 5 years as a field deputy. Now, while that may seem like a lengthy period of time, it does pale in comparison to what Jim Thompson, who was an Army Special Forces captain, endured. Jim Thompson was up there 10 days shy of 9 years. The thing of it is, during this situation, there's no saying about where there's life, there's hope. I've changed it around to say where there's faith, there's hope. When you have faith, you can endure anything. And we did. We had faith in our country, we had faith in our God, we had faith in our families, and faith in our government. And our faith was proven true. Unfortunately, our times, POWs came to an end with President Nixon. And a lot of people may have things about President Nixon, but I always hold in high regard. Because when negotiations in October 1972 started falling apart between Henry Kissinger and Wu Bantu in Paris, President and the big holdup was the North Vietnamese wanted the U.S. to withdraw, and then they would discuss releasing the POWs. Well, Nixon went by, so he authorized what became known as Linebacker 2, which unofficially was known as the Christmas Bomb in 1972. And they unleashed everything, B-52s, F-111s, and around the clock, 24 hours a day, 24/7. And this went on for 12 days, except for a day off for Christmas. And it was the most massive and precise air bombardment campaign the world had ever seen. And this drove force, because you had a president who had resolved to do the right thing. In 12 days, he brought an end to a war that had gone on for 12 years. And it forced the belligerent North Vietnamese to negotiate the table. And as a result of that, after a month of negotiations, they signed a peace agreement. Within 2 months, we were all released and returned home. And it was great. We came home for very proud of becoming home to America back then. But as during my time in Hanoi, I realized as patriotic and dedicated to our nation as I thought I was. It became clear to me that I had also become complacent in accepting all the blessings of being Americans. And then I vowed I would never again take for granted that God had favored our nation. And when I think about the day we're on in 9/11, when I think about the fact it's a shame that it took such a blatant, catastrophic attack on our shores to awaken so many people in our country to the menaces facing our nation. And even more shame is the fact that this has been 9 years without an apparent attack. Too many of those who were initially aroused have slipped back into a state of complacency, blithely accepting what is happening to them. But far too many people fail to recognize that enemies to our American way of life can be foreign or domestic. The latter is far more subtle, insidious, and perhaps more dangerous. The domestic enemies can be encroaching upon our God-given rights in small, incremental ways, perhaps stirring some an occasional short-lived outburst that will subside back into docile acceptance. I'm reminded of a Smothers Brothers song back in the 60s in which Dick Smothers described an increasingly anxious and faster-paced melody how a snake first swallowed his toe, then progressed to the foot, then the whole leg, and proceeded up the torso. And finally, Dick ends with a, "He's swallowed my head," followed by silence. I just hope that comedic song is not an analogy of what is happening to our country today. With the way the government is intruding more and more into our lives and figuratively swallowing more and more of our independence. Abolitionist Wendell Phillips in 1852 declared, quote, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty," unquote. Those profound words are just as true today. We need to be ever alert to the eroding of the American way of life, and we need to hold our elected officials accountable to ensure they honor and fulfill their oaths to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. Fortunately, we have patriots such as yourself who truly care about America, who will stand up and be counted. But we need more Americans, many more Americans, to uphold their civic responsibilities, become knowledgeable and proud of the greatness that is America and the hard work, diligence, and sacrifices that it is so. Our forefathers created the noblest social experiment in the history of mankind for future generations to nurture and make it prosper. We must do our duty to keep carrying it forward. On this 9th anniversary of 9/11, it is fitting that we recommit ourselves to this task I do not want any American ever being deprived of the goodness and blessings that come from living in a land of freedom with liberties that the vast majority of people throughout the rest of the world can only imagine. In closing, I'd like to leave you with what we used to do when we used to communicate up in Vietnam. We weren't allowed to communicate. We had to be very surreptitious, very stealthy. Because if you were caught, you would be, quote, punished for violating camp regulations. Anytime we ever signed off, it was always the same thing. GBU, GBA. God bless you. God bless America. Thank you.